Hi there! I want to show you today how to do this simple bouquet with pink florals and a blue background. I hope you'll join me. Let me show you everything I'm using today. Over here I have my Sonnet and SeimiArt watercolors, my Intuition 3/4 inch and size 6 round. I have my palette, and behind that I have 2 jars of water. One I use for washing the pigment off of dirty brushes, and the other I use as clean water either when I'm going in with a new color or as a wash. And my 350 GSM watercolor paper that I got from Dollar Tree. Let's get started. Hi everyone. So today I want to do this real quick tutorial on this floral vase. I just had this idea in my head, and I thought it would be super fun to try. So this is my first go at this, and I'm using indigo from my SeimiArt watercolors, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of a squiggle on my palette, a little bit of water. I want to make sure this is just a little bit more of a wash than just the solid color on my paper. So I'm just outlining this vase here. And I have done this technique before, but I have not used this blue background, and this is what I kind of had in my head today. And I just love this blue. It's really kind of my favorite blue when I do a floral, particularly these pink florals that I just love to do. So you see, I'm just going for the idea of this vase and then this background, which I think will be really pretty. And I do not need the background to be perfect. I don't mind if it's a little streaky or anything like that, because, you know, when you think of viewing something in the foreground, the background often does have some shadows here and there on it. And one thing I would like is to get these initial strokes just a little smoother, and I think that's good. Brush some of this over, and I'd like a little bit of depth and shadow in here because that's where my florals will be, and so there would be some shadow in that. I'm rinsing off that brush and starting with my size 6 round. I just want to take some of this Madder Lake Red. Now it is from my Sonnet watercolors. This is just a little palette that I put together of just favorite colors, favorite tones that I tend to use. So here I'm just dotting, and you can see that was a bit wet there. This is a bit wet and kind of bleeding and spreading. But I'm just making these floral centers. And I don't mind if some of them are wet and some are dry, and the reason is because, you know, when you think about a floral arrangement, a lot of times you do have some things that are just kind of more blur there in the background, and it makes sense that they would be that way. So I like to do that a bit. So these are kind of like this almost like a G, almost like a letter G. I probably will do one more right over here, just because I see that right now this little area needs one. Now I like for these to be kind of drippy because then I'm going to brush some water into them to shape my petals. So I want these really wet. And that way this pigment can just bleed into the water that I brush in. Okay, rinse off my brush. You can see I probably didn't add pigment to that one, so I'll come back to that. Then I'm just going to brush in these petals. I'm just using plain water, clean water. I rinse my brush off in my rinse water, and then I try to come back with clean water from my other jar. And I do not care if these flowers kind of merge a bit, if the petals touch. That does not faze me at all. I actually kind of like it. You would have that overlap in some flower arrangements, so why not here? So, you know, 4 or 5 or so petals, whatever you like. And we're just kind of doing this quickly because we want these to really bleed into the water that we're brushing in. And you'll see I added some pigment back into that one because that's the one I previously missed. Oh, I started to go for pigment there and I don't need it. I'm just still working with my water. Kind of thinking about the direction that these would go naturally. One of the things that I just kind of like to do, I just think it's fun, is to have these florals that are kind of an exaggerated big size. They can be simple, but they're kind of, for the size of the vase, they're kind of big, and I just think that's fun. So sometimes I like to paint these just because they're kind of whimsical, and to me it seems like these big flowers, this little vase. I think it's cute. Add a little shadow here. Not a ton, but just enough. And I'd like to start adding some greens, but I do want these florals to dry just a little. So I think what I'll do is go in with some raw sienna into those centers. I think that will be pretty. Actually, I think I'd prefer I would prefer a lighter yellow, but I like this. I clearly had not completely decided on my palette. Yeah, I like that. And you'll see when you add this raw sienna into this Madder Lake Red, or whatever shades that you're using, there's a very good chance that this raw sienna will start to disperse some of the pink or red that you're using. And it's really interesting. It adds a really different kind of texture and depth in there, I think. So I like that. If you wanted, you could even go back with another tone in there, just kind of to give these some depth and variation. But I like that we have some deep tones, some lighter tones. I think that that's working real well. I might, just to balance this a little, now you know I'm not a fan of trying to balance too hard, but maybe go in with a little bit here. Just wherever you think you need it. But I'm just trying to balance this out a little bit with a little more depth down here. And I would like to leave that and let it dry. For the purposes of this video, I think I'll use my heat gun. Sometimes when you use a heat gun, it can be less desirable because it can cause your colors to be less vibrant. But I'm not that picky, and I'm going to use my heat gun. Okay, so I used my heat gun, and I don't feel that this needs to be entirely dry. I have some places that are still a little shiny. They're not pooled with water or pigment, but they're still a little shiny right here and right here. So when I start my greens, what I'll do is I'll just kind of avoid those to begin with. And that way I'm not worried about things, the greens just going in and taking over the flower, bleeding into it. Now, I don't mind colors bleeding together. Generally, I like to keep things real loose, and I like some of those things bleeding together and merging together. I think can be very pretty and just kind of have a randomness. However, I don't like for the greens to take over my florals, and that can really easily happen. So that's all I'm trying to prevent right here. See, I'm going in with some stems, and I will not attach a stem to every single floral. I don't think that that's needed, but here and there, just a few key ones, maybe a handful of key ones. I'm kind of splitting those stems just a little, just to give a little definition, I guess, a little more interest. Now you see I got some bleed there, and I'm not worried. I did dab that just a bit for the purpose of controlling it so that it wouldn't just keep on going. Okay, and then you can just make a little mark here and there in between those, but again, not giving a stem to everything. You wouldn't necessarily see every stem in an arrangement, so it's not entirely necessary to connect every single one. Now I just want to go in with some really simple leaves. I like these, just little strokes. This, I did not mention, is an olive green. It is SeimiArt. And if you have followed my channel at all or my work on Instagram, you know that I'm a big fan of these olive greens. They are just they're my go-to greens. They just tend to look so nice with the palettes that I like to work with. So I'm just kind of dotting out these little branches and trying to keep it a bit random, not overthinking. Some things can overlap and you can put a leaf inside. I do like to try to get some variety in maybe how dark and how light my colors are. So I try to come back with a little more water on my brush, just a lighter wash of some of the greens. I think that looks very nice. And one other thing that I did here, and I do tend to like to do, is just to not have a completely symmetric or balanced arrangement. I just want to keep it a little more natural, a little more relaxed. So now I'm just giving these little wisps. Can add a little stem here and there in the bottom of that, inside the vase, or just right to the top of the vase. I like this real well. I think this is cute and fast, and you know, could crank this out really quick if you needed a birthday card or special occasion card for anyone, anniversary. I think that this would just work so well for that. And I like to use just the faintest amount of pigment for just a few things. I like to have you know, just this really light. I feel like you would maybe see that in the background there, and it just helps to kind of flesh it out so you have a little more depth. And I like that. I think that's super cute, and I would call that done. I think it has just about everything you need. You could go back with a little bit of a shadow on the top of your vase, maybe down one side, and I would consider doing that on another day. You could even put a pattern in the vase, you know, on it. That would be really cute too. But today I just really want the focus to be those florals. So now I think I would also go back in just with a little bit of the darker pigment here. And I want to keep this not just a dot in the center and not circular, but just kind of making a bit of an abstract shape there. And I'm doing that because it lost so much detail in the center. It really did just bleed out all of these. So one last little thing there, and I could go back and re-wet that a little. I could let that bleed just a little, take a little water on my brush. I don't want to lose too much of it again, so I'm going to be very careful about that. But just kind of one direction. So rather than all, you know, top, sides, bottom, I'm really just kind of focusing the flow of this down here. And then I'm just going to take a little of this pigment up around. And I want to kind of absorb a little of that back out, because I'm not making these layered with multiple layers of petals. But now this pigment is just kind of free to flow where the paper has been wetted, so it will look a bit more cohesive with the rest of the flowers. So there you go. That was under about 9 minutes and super quick, and I hope that you'll try it and enjoy it, and I hope you'll let me know how it goes. As always, happy painting!